webinar series on life. Today we have with us Mr. Praveen Bhargav from Wildlife First. So he will be focusing on tiger conservation challenges as well as opportunities. So life is a unique Prime Minister at the COP26 Glasgow on November 1st, 2021. So life focused on mindful and deliberation and utilization of the earth resources and protecting, propagating healthy and sustainable way, including through a mass movement of life, which is a tune with the planet and does not harm it. Those interrelation between life and planet, life and animals, and carbon every time we harm the Earth's biodiversity. So along with that, we are also celebrating 50 years of Project Tiger, which is a project Tiger Continue. The project aims to ensure viable population of tiger in its natural habitat, protect it from the presenting and the diversity ecosystem across using the GIS. Population was estimated today as 3,167 as compared to the 1,411 individuals in 2006. So we have currently 54 tiger reserves in India, which was declared by. So with this brief introduction about the life program, Tiger Conservation and World Earth Day, I feel needed to acting as a managing trustee for Wildlife First. Praveen has received a certificate of recognition from the Wildlife Conservation Society in 1998, and he is also honored by ESSO for the tiger conservation in the year 2001. So he is not only protecting the tiger, he starts for even protecting the entire ecosystem. So in the year 2002, an eminent international panel nominated Praveen was selected to participate in International Digital Leadership Program on Public Parks Conservation by the United States of America. 6 Wildlife Service Award to Praveen, and also he has been recognized by the Karnataka Wildlife Board and also taking various initiatives to protect the forest. I hope activities which help the.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Mr. Bharat and your team for inviting me. Today I will share domain which are already in the public domain. I think you have put too much faith in my ability, because I'll be competing with all they can't match up to their attraction and the way they attract crowds. But anyway, with a lot of visuals, so that even the students who are part of this program will be able to understand. So is the slide clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
Okay. So once again, welcome to the program. Good evening, everybody. So today I'll try to take you through the various facets of tiger conservation, which is not known to many people. So to go back between 1875 and 1925, and so also several other species like leopard and prey are be conserved. We'll talk about it in a little. The historical range of the tiger and where we are today. It's not really relevant. The orange, which used to go, the one on the left bottom is the Western Ghats, which is one of the strongholds. The other is the Central Indian population and so forth. So we have consistently been taking over tiger habitats to the detriment of tiger populations. So today we are left with about 1,70,000 square kilometers. So these still contribute 40,000 square kilometers in the country, and we should actually aspire to have more areas with tigers. It is changes when it breeding populations of tigers found. Good habitat conditions and good. The issue is that wherever we have breeding populations, we need to ensure populations is down to less than 2% of its former range. Yes, You may have been reading about of reasons and data to support that. So we need to be very careful, because the tiger society is built on around the breeding female. The tiger, once the cubs reach an age of about 18 to 24 months, the mother pushes away the cubs and they go out and try to establish their own territory. And they, at that period of their life, are called as transients or floaters. So sometimes what happens is that these transients push out an older animal and occupy that territory, or they may themselves get injured or killed in the fight for territory. So some of these animals come to the edge of the areas. There's sometimes come into villages and so forth, and there is conflict. Has studied this in great detail, and so his study that for a tiger to survive and raise its cubs, that is the correlation, and that is why prey densities are absolutely essential. Every time it attempts a hunt is going to bring down that prey. So it needs a base of about 500 prey animals, out of which 50 get 8%, and you take the interest but don't touch the deposit. So the 500 prey animals is like a fixed deposit. So out of which the tiger crops about 50. And that's crucial for tiger conservation. How do you identify tigers? I'll come to camera trapping and so forth. But fundamentally, you must realize that the stripe patterns of the tiger on the left are just this portion. This portion and this portion are very different. This is different, this is different. So this band is different. So therefore, you need to understand tiger ecology. And of course, now today, but again, we have moved from the incorrect pug mark methodology of estimating tigers to a slightly more sophisticated method called as camera trapping, which is what the government is using. Tigers are captured, marks, the tiger stripe pattern. You need too much of training, just a little bit of in a statistical framework. The estimates of tiger densities were released. So if you look at the populations, the estimate shown from 2000, and this is a reduction. Now the issue is that, in my view, these numbers cannot be compared with this till the final report comes out, for the simple reason that this is a tiger population estimate. This is only camera trap tigers. So we need to wait for the actual report, and you never can have an exact number. Therefore, if you see in 2018, there's 93. That's the range. Now, the brief background pug mark census was all about. Extreme resistance from the bureaucracy. Ullas Karant, he pressed hard, and finally a very, very sincere and forward-looking director, a very upright officer, and he said, nothing doing, what is this pug mark? We need to junk this. And that is how this started, and this methodology, they are doing absolutely doing independent study. Other opportunities for independent scientists are shrinking, at least in the field of wildlife biology. Even then, this methodology has been seriously critiqued. You cannot sample methodology for extrapolation. Arjun, Ullas and Mohan Delampadi have seen, and Stenson have really is not correct talk on this, but the short point is that there are issues with respect to even the sampling based its prey and its habitat. But habitat is also an extremely crucial aspect when you talk of tiger conservation. Estimates that estimated to be $20 billion. So these resolution and go away. What is required is strong law enforcement. Otherwise, we will continue to lose tigers and the illegal trade will go on. It is still very and say, oh, we have won this battle on tiger conservation. We have not. Of reasons, including illegal. First, I am flagging all the threats that kill things, some bushmeat and so forth. Here, you are in some sense, normally your images snares, wire snares, is going on. And unless and until foot patrolling is done to protect snaring activity and so forth, so active protection is required. We'll come to the solutions also. So we have talked of into habitat. India aspires to grow economically, which is an extremely important and correct approach to planning. In many cases, indiscriminately fragmenting wildlife habitats. Fragmentation is a much studied, there have been scholarly studies on the impact of fragmentation on habitats, and development projects like what you're seeing, mining, dams, highways and pipelines and all kinds of linear intrusions are not being screened properly, and they are fragmenting habitats. So I'll explain to you why this is problematic. For a development project, we are going to plant 100 hectares somewhere, has to be understood. To good roads. But are we going to, for instance, in the Western Ghats, and many of you are from this area, start in ways, expanding highways in every 15, 25 kilometers, as less as sometimes. But this is the problem, is established or diversity hotspot. There is tremendous amount of studies that have proved that. So even we are pushing in linear intrusions in a haphazard manner. So not only does a new greenfield road was planned to connect Shishila and Gundia within a space of 15 minutes from an existing highway. 15 debating on the Hubli-Ankola railway and whether its utility is as projected. So these kind of parallel linear intrusions are causing havoc with not just tiger habitats, across all habitats, and we need to be extremely careful with these projects. Tigers can harmoniously coexist. Nothing can be as naive as this. There are habitats and tigers also. So spatially separating tigers and humans is the way forward, and I'm going to explain it. Thousands of years ago does not. 60 tigers, 6,000 people, 600 plus elephants with a market suffer. Can you switch off the mic, please? Rights inside tiger reserves is a matter of serious concern. Fire is often used to collect many forest produce. So, and fire indiscriminately destroys wildlife habitat. But at the same time, people marooned inside these tiger reserves, we may think, oh, they're living so harmoniously and so wonderfully. But elephants have destroyed the crop of this farmer, and he opted to move out of Bhadra Tiger Reserve, where we had worked. And I think one of my colleagues who took a lead role in this, D.V. Girish, is probably part of the program. And when tigers kill cattle, they are poisoned. So we need to be really careful because we are down to about all other endangered wildlife. If we have not resolved our economic development as landscape, are we going to make any dent on that problem? If we fragment and destroy the last remaining 4%. So we need to find solutions that are grounded in science in order to address these aspects. Today, actually creating more problems. North Indian reserves being, these are not the people who are going to fight for the cause of tiger in the future. We want good people to become saying, oh, I took a photograph of tiger, I have an 800. Our tourism, ecotourism, there is nothing ecological. This is the problem that the forum for it. And I don't know if any forest officers are part of this program, but if there are any, I humbly request them to take a serious. We are destroying tiger habitats using this earth moving equipment. The real recovery, bulldozers and no excavators, etc. The best recoveries happen. Why do we want money is flowing to tiger reserves? Problem, which is an internal problem which needs to be redressed. Many people will not talk about this because they don't want to take on the bureaucracy. But now, because the remedy is worse than the mayar, but many other things, greening India, but losing forests. You're creating plantations like these. These are exotic species of acacia. And you are saying, oh, for every tree cut, we are planting 2 trees, etc., etc. But this is really not in the policymakers, but this is, everybody loves this. Corporates love it. They'll say, oh, we'll take 10 hectares of forest here, missing out on a huge amount of opportunities to consolidate existing landscapes. And in many cases, if you just protect a degraded forest, so-called degraded forest, the forest will come back on its own slowly. You don't need a bulldozer or dig a pit and buy a polythene bag, create a nursery and raise a sapling and hope that it will become a forest someday. So this needs urgent attention of the government and corrective measures. So till now, I explained some of the problems. There are many other problems. We can keep problems. Can believe that if the first and fundamental thing is we must clearly strong protection mechanism. Without the people holding automatic weapons there are in Srisailam Tiger Reserve, which was at that time a Naxal infested area. So therefore, otherwise the picture you see on the left is what is reality. They sound very, very basic and rudimentary. America with all its equipped with anything, but they had strong terrain knowledge and with rudimentary equipment, the best army in the world could not challenge them. Similarly, therefore, foot patrolling is a crucial aspect, which unfortunately officers sitting somewhere with iPads and digital equipment or software. Of course, for boots on the ground. So you have, in fact, senior officers of patrolling interior who have this mechanism in place. And they also support this effort. That is very good. But Gram Sabhas and communities can serve the forest departments, must work and take on these international, like somewhat similar to saying, it's because the logic is it's our own money inside. Is that ever? These are preposterous excesses on local communities are seriously addressed. We need professional law in dire need of reforms. Nobody can dispute that. But to say that just remove the forest department and hand over forest to Gram Sabhas, that is something which is unacceptable. Now coming to this solution of how do you address tiger habitats are free of human. Voluntary resettlement is a win. Organizations working on rapport between the community and NGOs and with the forest department, which is very important. Selection of alternate strips away. You need to involve the people in selecting the land and that land. So that must get approval and so forth. Funding. There are several streams of funding for their welfare. There is a humongous budget under 28 odd schemes of Government of India, totaling to about 1,30,000 crores per annum. There is a Press Information Bureau release on this also. You can access it. It's on the net. So also, and CAMPA, the central government has released 48,000 crores to states. Karnataka has received one. I just learned that I showed you pictures of bulldozers, etc. We discussed about tiger numbers and so forth. Unless and until independent scientific tiger populations expect this in the medical field. There are so many people, so many stop independent research. We say, oh, ISRO has launched another satellite, it has landed on the moon, blah, blah, blah. Putting science in space technology or in space, questioning the data that exists, the findings that have been published, and that's how science grows. We are not talking of some 100-year-old tiger conservation plans that are meant to manage. None of these tiger conservation plans, that is the reason why this kind of rampant use of bulldozers, etc. is going on. That's not the way to manage tiger reserves. The Wildlife Institute of India brought out a very good document on mitigating impacts of linear infrastructure. But first and foremost, the principle of avoidance was first done 50 years ago. Over a long, we have smarter solutions. We have high priorities that I feel and be happy to take it because 8 o'clock I'm told that the program ends. Thank you. I'll stop sharing the screen now.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for sharing the very valid information and having the higher ecotourism and also allowing the more and more projects inside the forest area. So you rightly pointed out the lacunas from the government side and as well as some of the forest department officials who are having the very short-sighted vision. So thank you so much for pointing out, sir. Now I request before that, Forest Right Act to tiger habitats.
That's a very contentious issue. And there are two caricatured as a class struggle between the haves and have-nots. It is certainly not that. Second, if you look at data, and about 12 to 13 years, 2 lakh hectares of forest planted, both individual, fair enough. But if you take individual rights, there is about 20 lakh hectares of forest land that have been granted as individual rights in scattered parcels. Even assuming if the idea is to give land to the landlord, done in an appropriate place where so avoided creating new roads, new power lines, new communication lines, etc. Now this is the problem with respect to this law was not as if they were not resettled outside. they would, which expanded the bill. First, it was only meant for tribal people, and tribal people have certain rights under the constitution. But the JPC felt that traditional forest dwellers. In fact, so there are multiple issues, and satellite-based imagery surveys that have been done show that huge 2005. This is stark high-resolution satellite imagery, not false color composites, and all these are available. The issue, therefore, is that and then there are legal aspects to it, whether the central government has the legislative competence to enact a law on land revenue and land survey, because they are in the state list, and not is that the presumptions made in the forest rights communities as well as forests are going to lose out.
Okay, so thank you so much.
Many people want to come. I have gone and talked to many people, not just in Karnataka. I've gone to Uttarakhand, deep in. You do it transparently in a manner and form that is site-specific and with the best possible.
So there is one more question by Sudhindra. Yes, by the way of policy change.
We do not know conservation reserves and community reserves. Conservation reserves do not have the kind of legal protection that a sanctuary or a national park has. So that we have at least in place a sanctuary where rights of local people can continue in a sanctuary and give that area better protection. This is possible, and I believe that that's the way forward. And in fact, there have been some attempts to identify critical corridors and so forth. There is a inbuilt mechanism where these project proponents can be told to purchase land, critical parcels which are identified, and mutate it in favor of the forest department. But it's not happening. So there are mechanisms, but certainly I can say that consolidation of habitats is extremely important.
There is a question by Asta.
So AEWS.
JOOS, Jews.
Zoos have a very limited role to play in terms of wild populations. But a well-maintained zoo can certainly help in educating and generating interest amongst younger populations. And I mean, it's difficult to see a tiger in the wild, but you can go to a zoo and see a tiger in the wild. You can observe it, and many other animals. So that can be the first steps, etc. are in.
There are three specific questions from one of the researcher from Goa. So he posed the questions with respect to Goa only.
Right.
So what about tigers in Goa? Looks like mismanaged, evident from unfortunate mortality recently.
I think Goa has a good set of organizations that are fighting to save certain areas. I know of Claude Allen's case. Writ petition number 460 of 2004 has led to the notification of. But then, yes, there are a lot of issues in Goa pertaining to power lines, pertaining to mining and so forth. Again, I would like to highlight public interest, but provided that they work with somebody who is trained and you don't commit mistakes and you don't indicate incorrect, but certain crucial areas have to be defended, and you need to convince the government and wide-ranging rights granted to citizens to approach the Supreme Court or the High Courts. And that, because you can't just rush to courts and as an attempt to ensure that. And one important thing I would like to tell my friend is that today it is not enough if you just keep saying don't do this, stop this, even if you, and alternatives, even if your court goes up. That's important.
So there is another question. Are ban on researchers entering into the tigers?
Of two reasons. One, it is the fundamental right under Article 19. So no fundamental right can be curtailed. This is very important. Second, the law has certain regulations. There are two types of research, as he would know, wild animal. That would be such permissions. However, if it involves capturing a wild animal or a bird for ringing or whatever it is, you will need other permissions, particularly so when Schedule 1 species are involved. For instance, if you want to radio collar a tiger, you will have to capture it. So you will be a little difficult to get. But these permissions have to be granted, and in fact we have tried to simplify it to the extent possible, but somehow it has been properly. In some states, chief wildlife wardens are actively trying to stop researchers, but the researcher, if he is qualified, if he or she is qualified, but at the same time I'll say that anybody and everybody walking in will not get a permission. Share the data as.
Okay, sir. One more question. How mining is allowed?
This is reality. Now, so why should of the Wildlife Protection Act, improvement and better management of wildlife, Fortunately, many of those decisions are not in compliance with court orders. And I know for a fact that Goa fought the case of mining in Kudremukh National Park. We won the case. Mining is stopped and all infrastructure has been removed. Yes, it is difficult to fight these. There is no scope for granting mining. The person is this participant.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the pain to answer the questions in detail. So now I request Dr. Officer. So I request Madam to share her views on this presentation.
To hear your talk, and I fully agree with whatever you've said, because those were my views when I retired. I mean, I was there from evaluating the schemes of the ministry. There were some things which were not logical. That it's actually, I mean, you have a pyramid structure for a habitat. So that is a logic that was given to me, which I found was really astounded me. And another scheme for wildlife, development of wildlife. You're doing that, and the funding for that was MOEFCC into an wildlife conservation authority, so that you take care instead of just tiger. But that didn't go down well, of course. So feeling all along, and though I retired, and even though my knowledge is not as you have done so much of research on this, and you've also worked this, and in that you showed us those photos of this is how it's being managed, and patterns. That's what we want to do. So wildlife which they have to be preserved, but individuals also. How do we?
For instance, called as rewilding. People, they face a lot of issues with respect that problem into a proper assessment, scientific, and encourage them to slowly move away from their growing of maize or rice. And there's the government-owned tourism corporations or even private entities, because the community can bring in the technical competence. And what happens is, instead of all habitat, as well as reducing pressure in Amazon, is very different of the harmonious coexistence idea that emerged from Amazon. Is very different, except for portions of North Sentinelese, which is not part of mainland India. Much of in mainland India, it doesn't work. Similarly, this high density tourism doesn't work in many of our reserves because they're very, very small. And we are other animals, birds, so much of and certainly in the meanwhile, restrictions will follow solutions. It's a kind of a cycle. Like for instance, if you know for compliant, etc., etc. So therefore, regulations are sense of ownership to the local community, because they will say that, hey, you're moving us out from tiger reserves and hate it. So you need to address that proper of the tourism vehicles. All this is happening, but it's still early days.
Thank you for your talk, and I hope that we can work together in future. Thanks for you.
Thanks a lot, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I request Dr. TVRAMACHANDRA, sir, to share his views.
Okay, Namaskar, Praveen ji, for an interesting talk.
Thank you.
I am listening to you, interesting, and I also must congratulate you. You have, okay, I'm sure many youngsters video in the YouTube, the many more will also in Goa. We know the problems, sparing your time, and I'm sure many of the youngsters have benefited from that, including people. So, okay, Bharat.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Namaskar.
Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. On behalf of IISc-EIACP and also Soaring Sparrows Foundation, I thank everyone and sharing his views. In that workshop, we wanted your thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you. Good.
Thank you so much.
Good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Namaskar.